When you're standing in the electronics aisle, or scrolling a sea of compact cameras online, the first question that pops up is usually, will this actually work for me? Or am I just paying for a shiny box? I've been there, and I know the hesitation that comes with spending a decent chunk of money on a camera that might end up gathering dust. That's why today I'm breaking down the Canon PowerShot G7X Mark II in a way that lets you weigh real-world value, everyday usability, and the kind of trade-offs you'll actually notice once you take it out of the bag. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about who this camera is really built for. If you're a complete beginner who still thinks autofocus is a mysterious term, you'll probably find the G7X Mark II a bit of a steep learning curve, especially because Canon's menu system still feels like a mini version of the DSLR interface, lots of layers and a few hidden settings. That said, if you've already shot with a point-and-shoot or a smartphone and you're ready to step up to something that gives you more creative control without the bulk of a mirrorless system, this camera lands squarely in the sweet spot. Hobbyists who want a pocket-sized tool that can handle both stills and video, as well as content creators who need a reliable webcam alternative, will find a lot to like. One of the first things I tested was how the camera behaves in low-light situations, the kind of dimly lit restaurant, a city street after sunset, or an indoor event where you can't control the lighting. The 1-inch stacked CMOS sensor paired with the Digic 8 processor does a respectable job. At f/1.8 on the wide end, you'll see a noticeable reduction in noise compared to older 20-megapixel compacts, and the images retain decent texture up to ISO 3200. It's not a full-frame miracle, but for a camera that fits in a jacket pocket, the ability to capture a usable photo without resorting to a flash is a genuine strength. If you routinely shoot concerts or nighttime wildlife, you'll probably need a larger sensor, but for everyday low-light moments, the G7X Mark II holds its own. Autofocus confidence is another practical concern. Canon's dual pixel light contrast detect system is fairly fast for a compact, but it does have a habit of hunting when you move the subject quickly across the frame. In my tests, static subjects like a portrait or a stationary object locked instantly, and face detect worked reliably even when the subject was partially turned away. However, for fast-moving action, say a kid running across a park or a pet chasing a ball, you'll notice a slight lag compared to a dedicated mirrorless with on-sensor phase detection. If your primary use case involves street photography with quick moments, you may need to be a bit more patient or give the camera a little extra time to lock focus. Stabilization is where the G7X Mark II really shines for its class. The built-in optical image stabilizer works well for handheld video at 4K 30p, and it also helps steady stills at slower shutter speeds. I filmed a vlog segment while walking down a busy sidewalk, and the footage stayed smooth enough that I didn't have to resort to a gimbal for basic movement. The 4.2 optical zoom, covering 24,100 mm equivalent, is a decent range for travel, wide enough for architecture, tight enough for portrait framing, and the aperture stays relatively bright throughout, which means you don't lose a lot of light when you zoom in. That said, the zoom isn't as fast as a dedicated telephoto lens, so there's a small amount of focus breathing when you swing from 24mm to 100mm, which can be noticeable in video if you're doing a quick zoom pull. Battery life is often overlooked until you're mid-shoot and the indicator blinks red. The G7X Mark II uses a rechargeable Li-ion pack that comfortably gets you about 300,350 shots per charge when you stick to still photography. Video, especially 4K, drains the battery faster. I managed roughly 45 minutes of continuous recording before needing a recharge. For casual weekend trips, that's fine if you carry a spare or a portable charger. If you're planning a full day of vlog shooting without access to power, you'll want a backup plan. Now, let's address the menu friction that can make or break a compact camera. Canon's menu is organized into layers that mimic their larger EOS bodies, which feels familiar if you've used a Canon DSLR before, but can be confusing for newcomers. You have to dive into submenus to adjust things like white balance or custom picture profiles, and the touchscreen, while responsive, sometimes lags when you try to swipe through settings quickly. Once you get past the initial learning curve, the camera is quite flexible. You can dial in a flat picture profile for color grading later, or switch to a vivid preset for instant social media ready shots. If you prefer a camera that just clicks without digging, you might find this a bit of a hurdle. One of the standout practical features that many users overlook is the